Well, we're live now, Jeff.
Okay, sorry.
Don't be sorry. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Whose jersey is that behind you?
It's actually a team. I coached collegiate and high school basketball, and it was one of my teams. It was the seniors that gave it to me for a gift at the end of the season. And then
That's
these
really
right here,
cool.
that's actually my dad in this suit.
Oh,
Um, he coached basketball and baseball at Colorado School of Mines a long, long time ago.
so you got like athletic coaching in your blood.
Yeah, that picture I think was taken a year before. It's like 1961. They just
That
got
is
a
so
new
cool.
they got a new pitching machine, so they were pretty excited about that.
Oh, yay.
So
Well, if you want to give your background for everybody.
sure. So kind of way I got started in all of this is it goes all the way back to when I was in high school, and it was a basketball game, and we were playing our crosstown rival, and it was a big game. And this was back in the day where kids didn't have anything else to do.
Yeah,
So the gym was sold out. They were actually
right.
turning people away. And I got up, there was 4.2 seconds left on the clock, and I got fouled. I played because I could shoot the basketball. I wasn't the greatest defensive player, but I could shoot the basketball. And so for me, I get up to the line. The first one I let go was nothing but net. Well, the opposing coach called a timeout.
Oh boy.
And so, yeah, so I'm walking back, and my coach goes, he says, when Jeff makes this, this is what we're going to do. And then he said, if he misses, this is what we're going to do. And that word miss stuck in my head. And I'm writing a book right now, and one of the chapters is going to be called 38 Steps, because that's how I went back and looked from the bench to the foul line, 38 steps it took me to get to there. And I had the automatic negative thoughts in my brain, and it almost paralyzed me. I could feel when I brought the ball up to my, just getting ready to let go of it, I felt my hands shake. And that's not good for an athlete when you're trying. I missed the shot. We lost. And it still bothers me to this day. And so when I went to college, I thought I want to help athletes so that that doesn't ever happen to them, because it's a terrible feeling. And as I coached throughout my career, I just realized it's like nobody teaches this stuff.
Right.
It's like as a coach, we're so consumed um, by plays, the way they're set, talent, the way we develop that, but we're not really. And now, when I started 30 years ago, nobody did it. Now it's starting to get a little bit better, but that's kind of where everything started. And then I went to school, and I got my bachelor's degree in it's social psychological kinesiology. I got a master's degree in pedagogy. And then I started looking at, I love the sports psychology stuff. But then I started looking, it's like, man, if somebody's struggling with the physical part of their brain, the stuff I'm trying to teach is could be a struggle.
Right.
And so that's where I found Dr. Eamon and you guys. And I was so excited because I thought, man, I can really help a lot of athletes. And I think if we come to terms, with a lot of athletes that I work with, collegiate football players, professional football players, things like that, it, um, we're, we still haven't come to the truth that it damages your brain. It's a real struggle. A matter of fact, I was working with he's a 6'6", 300-pound lineman, big. I'm 5'8", so his arms are as big as my thighs. Put it that way. And working with him, it really has opened my mind, um, on not only the psychological part of somebody that's at that level and that has that body. So here's a little story. He told me, he said when he was growing up, they were trying out for Pee Wee football. You know, he was always a bigger kid. And he remembers, in football, you're taught to hit,
Right.
you know, and it was him and his best friend, and they had to do a hitting drill. Well, I guess he just drilled his little buddy, and I consider myself, I would be his little buddy.
Yeah.
And it's such a struggle in this respect that the coaches and the team's going crazy because it was such a great hit. He looks down at his friend and he's in tears. It's just like hurt, and this kid he's got a great heart. And he goes, it was just such an emotional, I didn't know how to feel. I look down and I just hurt my best friend, but my coaches and everybody's telling me, how awesome it was. And so I don't think we teach, or we don't take into consideration those type of situations for athletes. And he's carried that through his whole career. And he goes, Jeff, and I'm not here to bash him. I love football. I mean, if I had the body, who knows what, but I just look at it and I think to myself, our our brain is soft, very soft, and football's very rough. So I think to myself, how many athletes are walking around with those kind of issues that we never ever even see or talk about, and the struggles. And you look at a Division 1 college athlete, um, if they've been playing for years, I just texted that athlete, and I said, how many times do you think you've had a brain injury or concussion? And this is how he described it. He said, blackout 3 times, laying there flat, getting dizzy during a game hundreds of times. And of course, an athlete that wants to play, it's hard for them to tell somebody, you know.
It is. When I was doing intakes, I always had this really awkward, I mean, I have to ask people really awkward questions, but it was the most awkward was having to ask NFL players, if you had to wildly guess, how many concussions do you think you've had? And they're like, I literally have no idea. And that was the way they would have to describe it, like blackout is feeling dizzy. And then it's like me pulling out my calculator because I'm bad at math. This many seasons, you started playing at this age, you've played this position, which is hitting play. That's basically the number that we're looking at.
Yeah. Yeah. And he kind of said, it's really funny. It's not, well, I mean, now that he looks back at it, but he's like, I can remember times, me hitting somebody or somebody hitting me, and like going to the huddle and coming back and not realizing where I was at really.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, I'm on the line again, that kind of stuff. And so I guess one of the things that I'm trying, as what I do with my company is, and I actually just changed the name of our company, and it's called Alpha Flow Athletics. And
Love it.
I look at that, and flow state is such a big thing right now, and everybody's been in it. You don't have to be an athlete to really, I look at somebody who plays the piano, or my wife works at a hospital. She's a mammographer, and she goes, there are days that just fly by. She just is in that, and so that's kind of the sweet spot right now. But if we have brain issues, then I don't know, it's just me, but I think we probably would struggle to get into that state. And so, if this comes across any football coaches or any, it's like, just think if we could have a program built around. Now, look, I think everybody understands football's not going away because it hurts your brain. it just is not. There's too much money,
Mhm.
there's too much fame, there's too much power.
Yeah.
But what if we, what if a whole football team was on a program that would try to do the best in healing when they're not playing?
Exactly. Yeah. And the healthiest NFL player's brain I ever saw, I actually had to go to my scan tech because I thought we made a mistake because he had a very healthy looking brain. And then later, I guess he just kind of forgot to in the intake process. He's like, "Oh, I've slept in my hyperbaric chamber every night for 4 years." And I'm like, okay, that makes sense why your brain looks so
Yeah.
healthy.
Yeah. But we don't, and I would imagine at a high school level, are you kidding? Nobody's ever, if it's a concussion, they throw,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not trying to, I love the sport. So I'm just saying, I want kids now that I'm 58. Now that I'm older, it's like I look back and I think to myself, okay, you sacrificed all this for a certain amount of time. And then it's like, football players, I just read the average career is 3 years long.
Yeah, but if you make $100 million,
Yeah, it's true. And I'm just saying, why don't we try to do everything that we can so that you're with your $100 million, when
you're
your
not blowing it.
career's over, you have a beautiful, exactly right. You have a beautiful life instead of one that's just depression and struggle and not trying to, you're trying to figure out what your life means. And, I've worked with a lot of athletes that the day they're done, either professionally or, at the collegiate level, it's like they don't know who they are. They one day one athlete told me, one day I'm like a stud on campus. I graduate and I'm just a big 6'6" guy,
Mm-hmm.
and so if we could maybe put them in a process where their brain is at least at the best possible scenarios when they're not playing all the time. um, just like you said, the hyperbaric, there's different ways that we can really help athletes do that. And I look at the struggles for, uh, collegiate athletes because of classes, and if you're
Yeah.
struggling brain wise, that's just a struggle.
Yeah, that's what always was really interesting to me is when people could perform and then they would say like I'm performing because I'm doing these things or I'm performing because my teacher is just giving me a good grade so that I can continue to play. And that's why I tell you this every time we talk. I was so surprised that I liked you so much because I like looked you up and I'm like, this guy likes sports and he likes football. I'm like, I don't like football. It's bad for the brain. You just have such a beautiful perspective because you know how to help people get the life they want as an athlete, but while taking care of their brain and continuing to make it healthier and making good decisions. So, because we talked about it so many times, I'm just curious what your biggest, I mean, for me, hyperbaric for sure is a big one, and supplements definitely. But for you, when you went through, Dr. Amon's coaching certification, like what was kind of the biggest aha?
So for me, and the easiest thing for an athlete is ants. It's automatic negative thoughts.
Love
I
that.
can change. I can change it. It's like it's almost instant. I can change an athlete's performance just by that, just by the way they think.
Love it.
And it's funny because I coached for a long time. I coached at 5 different high schools. I coached at University of Northern Colorado and Colorado State. Now this was men's basketball, it wasn't football. I was a I was a 5'7" basketball player, so you know how far that went. But that's one reason why I started studying sports psychology, because I had been recruited by small colleges,
Yeah.
and I thought to myself, okay, if I can make my brain better, then maybe I can be better at 5'7" than a guy at 6'3",
Mm-hmm.
because that's usually who I would be. You know, I would I played point guard, so I would defend. Probably the point somebody that's is shorter and quicker. But as I got up to big colleges, it's like, okay, these guys are just as quick as I am, and they're 6'7". their body.
It's kind of crazy to see some of the things that these athletes do. I mean,
Oh, I just, and I, I thought to myself, it's like all men aren't created equal. I can just tell you now, we might have the mental capacity, but when it comes to the physical part, it's just not equal. When I see, I remember when I was a kid, I was probably a junior in high school, and this is when Michael Jordan was just huge. And when he did the slam dunk competition and jumped from the foul line, and dunked. And I remember going out and saying, "Okay, I'm going to jump from the foul line." I was probably about 3 feet short and about 5 feet on the height area. I
yeah.
didn't even touch the net. So you look at it, it's just like it's just a different. But I thought mentally, if I could figure out a way to perform at my height, and so that's where I kind of got started. But as I go through 30 years worth of coaching, and I just start understanding not only the psychological part, the sports psychology, but also the last probably 5 years, I've really, with the Amen clinics, is I've really dove in, and I just am so passionate about, man, if you're a high school player right now, you've got to do things to prepare your brain. If you're a high school player going to Division I school and getting a full ride scholarship, it's a very rare player that's just going to quit. They're just not going to do it.
Hmm.
So I'm just thinking to myself, how can I put you in a position where we can at least make your brain the best it possibly can be for the punishment that it's going to take? And so, and it's not only football. You look, I have 4 children, 3 daughters and 1 son. And my son was he's a pretty good little soccer player, and played basketball too. But I just think to myself, I wonder, and this was back before I started really understanding and studying this. How, I was like, how many times has he hit his head with that ball? And I was in front of about 120 Division I athletes speaking, and I flexed my bicep. They kind of laughed a little bit, and then I pointed and I said, "What's that?" And they said bicep, and then I pointed it at my hamstring, and I pointed at my calf. They all knew, and they could give me technical terms. And then I pointed
Hmm.
at this, and I said, "Name one thing." 120, and they're dumbfounded.
Hmm.
They just don't know. And I'm like, well, if I took this one thing away from your body, how well would you perform? And they're looking at me like you're an idiot, but it's making the point. It's like
Right.
it's everything, but we don't pay attention to it at all.
Yeah. And my story is so different because I actually had my first concussion just on the first day of soccer in 6th grade. I was beside myself in excitement. I barely slept the night before. And I had kind of like a seizure like episode. And then I fell and hit the back of my head on the table and then on the ground. And I was out for a while. It's pretty scary. But every other time that I would slip and fall, because I played in Northeast, like snow, rain, mud, whatever. So anytime I would just slip and fall and then hit the back of my head and get like the wind knocked out of me, I was hitting the same part that was getting injured. And when I got my first scan, 20 later, maybe a little bit longer than that, you could still see the exact same spot that I kept hitting my head, let alone the frontal lobe damage from heading the ball, because I was wonderful at that. Even if I was in soccer, I was playing defense, I always went up for corner kicks because I could put the ball in the net with my head. And so my mom and I joke about it now because you would get a special treat. Your parents and your coach would like take you out to dinner, scored a header goal my entire life, middle school, high school. And then by the time college came around, I was just like, I don't know if I can handle this anymore because it's just too stressful.
Yeah. Yeah. You look at it, and I soccer's the same thing. It's not going away.
Mm-hmm.
But how can we put a player in a better position to handle those hits? At least try to. I mean, I don't think, and it's funny because if you look in the professional level, if you look at a professional football player and you say injury, they know what's going to happen. They just know it's part of their life, but they never think of a brain injury. It's all I'll maybe rip my shoulder out, tear an ACL, whatever throughout my body, but they're never saying, "Oh, I'm going to get this." And so, I guess one of my goals with all the athletes that I work with is just to put them in a healing situation when they're outside of their sport. If we could just teach athletes to do that. Just think if one NFL team, the whole team would get together and put themselves in a healing position when they're not, you know, I think practices are a lot different than they were a long time ago. I mean,
Thankfully,
yeah,
yeah.
and that's helped a lot. But it's outside of the practice situation. What are you doing? With some of the players I look at, when they struggle, they go to the bar.
Yeah, and if you
Which,
look at the, DUIs, DWIs, and domestic violence reports, they're very often, I don't know about this season because of COVID and if that's any different because they're not going out and like trying to impress fans or whatever. But I know up until last year, there was a really strong correlation between days they had games and then evenings that they were having all of those charges because their injury was so fresh and like their prefrontal cortex was basically just, and then definitely doing some damage to the temporal lobe, which is where you have like the anger and the suicidal thoughts. So that's really interesting. And I'm so grateful that at least they now supposedly have the informative CTE poster, which I was kind of sharing on social media for a while. Share it,
I'll
even though I
do
got a
that.
lot of
I'll do that too.
stuff. I
Yeah.
got a lot of crap for it, but it is what it is. Just when you look at the statistics of CTE and different, I mean, definitely other sports, but for football, it's like 99% of the players that so far have been in the study have had confirmed CTE. But again, chances for healing. One of our best research that Dr. Heyman ever did was published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease. The entire population in that study was specifically football players, and we rehabbed their brains in 6 months.
Yeah. And it was like 80 something percent or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. So, like Dr. Amen always says, you're not stuck with the brain that you have. You can
Right.
actually really work, and I'm just thinking to myself, okay, I have 7 grandchildren now.
Oh,
And I can
yay.
guarantee you that being a grandparent is 10 times better than being a parent.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to teach my grandchildren now these certain things, like just the automatic negative thoughts. Just think if we could teach a kid to build their brain with those confident words.
Do you have the little one pager?
Mm-hmm.
You do? Okay. That's my
Mm-hmm.
favorite thing. When I was working with patients, I would always have them put that on their fridge so that everyone in the family always saw it. And it just goes over the different species of the automatic negative
Yeah.
thoughts to remind everybody consciously and subconsciously by seeing all the time, just because you're having this thought has nothing to do with it being true. And the more that you think about the thought and what kind of thought it is, and then walking through the ways to get rid of it into a positive, can really change your life.
Yeah. And when I look, so here's a cool example. So I was working with some gymnasts, and this was at Denver University. They were at a big meet. And one of the gymnasts, in warm-ups, this was on the uneven bars, and on the warm-ups, she fell off 4 times.
Oh,
Her
wow.
hand slipped 4 different times,
Yeah.
and she had never done that once, let alone 4 times.
Wow.
And she's freaking out. And so one of the coaches said, "Hey, could you go see if you could figure this whole deal out?" And so I went up to her, and the first question I asked her, I said, "What are you thinking?" What and she's looking down stuff, and I actually kind of grabbed her, and no, it's like, "No, what are you thinking?" And then she just let it all come out. It's like, "I'm gonna fall. I'm gonna, this is gonna be the worst time of my life." It's just like just an avalanche of negative thoughts. And so I had about 7 minutes to try to get her in a decent place. And it's crazy. After we got done with some of the things that I did, she went back out and she actually scored the highest that she'd ever scored on the uneven bars. So
That's
obviously
amazing.
goes to show that, your past doesn't equal your future, but it's just the way you think. And that's what really hit me about automatic and oh, just so Dr. Eamon, I just want everybody. I got this is my anteater.
Very
And
cute.
I just think, if we could teach children, their brain would be in their body, because it affects your body too. Their brain and their body would be in such a better place. And I
Mhm.
look at the depression. I just read a study the other day that said 1 out of 4 collegiate athletes during COVID has considered suicide. 1 out of 4. And I'm like, we've got to reach out and figure out a way to really work with these kids. And it starts now. Obviously, you want to do it whenever the best time. But it's like, just think if we started as a young kid. I read a study that said uh, a child in a loving household has heard no or what they cannot do. It was like 180,000 times by the time they're 16 or 18 or something like that.
Mhm.
But I look at my life raising my kids, and I, I thought I was a pretty positive, tried to keep. And then I think of all the times that I said no like this, it's like,
Yeah.
don't, you know, and because I'm a pretty mellow, I don't scream. When I coached, I wasn't, that type of person. And I look at the way coaches coach. It's like you're almost coaching the greatness out of them by what you say to them.
It's kind of scary when I look at their body language of some of the big shot coaches.
Yeah, and and I understand, everybody's like, well, it's how you develop a relationship, and you got to know personalities, and I understand that. But if we knew what, I can't remember who said that, if we knew the power of our thoughts, we would never think a negative one again. And I just like, coaches feed negative thoughts to athletes. I mean, and it's a constant barrage of negative thoughts. And I thought to myself, because of the chemicals that are released when a player thinks that, well, just look at me going to the foul line.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I thought myself out of that shot. I was so nervous by the time that I got up and I was a great shooter. The first time I made it, I wasn't thinking at all. Well, maybe I was thinking, I got this. It's like,
Yeah.
this is my strength. Give me the ball. And I heard that one word from the coach, and he wasn't intentionally trying to freak me out or anything. He's trying to prepare the team. So what I did as a coach, if we were in that scenario, I would say, this is what we're going to do when he makes it. And then I would make the player leave, go walk out to the line. And then I would say, okay, if he does, this is what we have to do. Because you have to have him prepared. But I don't need to fill his head with what they did with me. And so automatic negative thoughts to me are just the biggest, easiest way, but it's a challenge. We don't know how much we're thinking every day.
Well, and I feel like some of the clients that you see have worked with so many kind of like high up coaches too, that by the time they get to you, they're in a state of trauma, and you almost kind of have to put that like, psychology on along with the coaching hat, because they just aren't really sure who they are and what they're doing and all of that. And I mean,
Yeah.
you're very humble this whole time. I mean, you work with Olympians, like you work with some of the best athletes in the world. So for anyone listening, just trying to get a perspective, I mean, these are people that probably have experienced some massive trauma from past coaches and things like that you're helping.
Yeah. And they're so physically gifted that it's just something I've noticed, that to be great is very hard, but when you have a great body, it makes it a lot easier. And so you got to match the psychology and the physical part of your brain with your body to develop and be, so that your life, I just keep all the athletes I work with, it's your life after sports. Sometimes, I don't know, maybe the prefrontal is injured so much that they don't think about that very much.
Exactly.
It's like, what are you going to do after this short time? It's like these guys are retiring at 26 years old, 27 years old. It's like, what? Okay, that's a very short time. Now, what are we going to do? And how are you going to heal your brain so that you'll have a beautiful, loving, kind relationships, life, that you'll go out and instead of, I just see so much depression afterwards.
Yeah, I would have loved that because I definitely was like not even thinking ahead ever in my life. And so if someone had said, like, what is your life going to look like at 20, 25, 30, 35, it would have been a lot different with or without sports, just in general, because of the brain trauma I'd already had that has impacted or was impacting my ability to make good decisions. Because I think about that now, especially recently when we were talking, I was kind of thinking of like the models and like the Instagram models and like all of that kind of thing and that correlation to athletes because it's related to their body. We have so many beautiful, famous women that come in who like, there's not one person on the planet that like wouldn't think that they're stunningly beautiful and perfect on the outside. The inside, they're being haunted by these negative thoughts. It's just constant.
Yeah, I've
Educated
actually
about this
worked
sooner.
with several you know they're I don't what are they called? They're not bikini mob, but they're
Like fitness people.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
getting I've worked with several of those, and it's funny how that, just like you said, they don't see what we see. They
Right.
only, when they look in the mirror, they're only looking for faults. So I actually was working with one girl, and she is ridiculously, she's just gorgeous in her body. She would look in the mirror, and so every time she looked in the mirror, I go, "What makes you happy?" And she said, "My dog."
Oh my gosh.
And I said, every time you look in the mirror, before you look, you have to train yourself to do this. You got to look at your dog first. And it's crazy. Within a week, she goes, "I can't believe how this has helped me because I'm smiling now when I look in the mirror and I'm starting to look for good things instead of all the negative things." You know, but in our society, women especially, when, when you're a big guy, that's kind of a cool thing. You're a big guy. You call a woman a big gal, it's not a compliment, right?
Right.
And so our society puts this, and if people are just not aware of what they're thinking, and they'll just follow what society perpetuates, and it's too bad because me raising three daughters, I see it. I see my youngest daughter. I remember going to high school, driving her to high school one day, and she was like freaking out. Now, not like, but you could tell she wasn't happy, and I'm like, "What's wrong?" And she said, "My eyebrows aren't on point." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she was so worried about her eyebrows. And I'm just like, okay,
Oh.
the only time I get worried about my eyebrows is when my wife yanks one. Then it hurts, you know. But we just look at things in such a different way.
Great.
And so if we could keep people, teach people to think about what they're thinking about, I think their life would just be so much better. And in an athlete's life, it I've seen it happen over and over again. So that's, I've tried to put a program together for all the athletes I work with. It's the psychological part, the brain health part, a little bit of the biological part on how, food sensitivities and things like that, how important that is. So it's a really, I'm just so proud of it. It's a really great program. And I have just seen so many athletes, their life has changed because of it. You
I
know,
am so excited for you.
they start playing for a different reason. They're happier people. They sleep better. They're more confident. I mean, it's funny how you look at some athletes you think are super confident,
Mhm.
but man, deep down inside, they're not. They kind of put on an air, and then
Mhm.
deep down inside and then and then I'm thinking, okay, what's the brain like? So anyway, I get so
So
excited about this stuff. I
I
just
know.
love it.
I'm so excited for you. So where? What's the name of your new website?
Right now, if you go on my Instagram page, I've just started a Facebook page, but my Instagram is usually where I do most of the stuff. It's called Alpha Flow Athletics. And if anybody's interested, there's a little link down there. It says Alpha Flow Athletics apply. And so I take people through an application. I've kind of learned through the ropes, and I'm really looking for people that really want to high achieve. I've worked with a lot of parents that want their kids to be high achievers, but that's kind of hard.
That's where that psychology degree comes in handy.
Yeah, that's right. And so I work with, like I said, it's not so much age, it's what they've accomplished. It's like, because what I'm trying to teach them is really for like the top 1% of athletes. It's like, you're going to have to develop your skill. You're going to have to do a ton of time just developing that. You're going to, the mental side of it. But once you get to a certain, I always tell athletes that talent equals out at the top. When you become an NBA player, everybody is 6'6". Everybody can jump out of the gym. So what makes a great person great and one not so great? And I think it's brain health and the psychology of what they do.
You're amazing.
Well, you are.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing. It's always
I love it.
To hear it.
And any other time, I'm there for you.
Thank you.
I'll just say one thing.
Okay.
That if we really start thinking about the health of our brain, our lives will be better. I mean, it can be an office worker, anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's a beautiful note to leave out on.
Thank you. You have a great day, Kay.
Thanks, Jeff. You too.
Okay.